is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
One thing I've always done is I pull a player off to the side, even if they turn the ball over, or maybe they are having a tough time with a set. I pull them off to the side and I don't embarrass them. I say, hey, coach, you got this. Or like, hey, guys, keep playing, keep playing. And I always have them stand shoulder to shoulder next to me. I never stand face to face because it's actually research. If you stand face to face someone, they get defensive. But if you stand shoulder to shoulder, you're a team.
Austen Hurley is a high school basketball coach in South Dakota. Austen has served as a head coach at Parker High School and as an assistant coach at T High School, where he helped the team make 3 consecutive South Dakota State basketball championship appearances and win 2 South Dakota State Championships. He was named the Assistant Coach of the Year in 2019. At the time of this episode, Austen is currently searching for a new head coaching position. Are you or an athlete you know planning to go D3? Check out the D3 recruiting playbook from D3 Direct. Their playbook gives you a clear step-by-step roadmap to the recruiting process, what coaches value, key milestones from early high school through application season, and how to build a targeted list of schools that fit your needs. The playbook demystifies researching D3 programs and how to stand out without chasing every camp or showcase. The modules cover things like writing emails to coaches, building an effective highlight tape, using social media well, planning camps and visits, and navigating application strategy. You'll get templates, checklists, and an outreach plan to communicate confidently, learn how to compare financial packages, and avoid common missteps. By the end, you'll have a prioritized school list and a decision framework you can use to land your best fit opportunity. Click on the link in the show notes to get your D3 recruiting playbook from D3 Direct.
Hi, this is Danny Young, the head boys coach at Shaker Heights High School, and you're listening to Hoop Heads Podcast.
Give with Hoops is the first platform turning basketball analytics into fundraising impact. Every stat tells a story, and now every story drives sponsorship, engagement, and team growth. Programs nationwide are transforming basketball stats into funding power. Learn to use performance data to attract sponsors, engage fans, and raise more with every play. Give with Hoops will help you raise 3 times more money for your program as their stat-based pledges consistently outperform traditional fundraisers. Visit givewithhoops.com/hoop-heads-podcast to learn more and take your fundraising to the next level. Give with Hoops. Grab pen and paper so you're ready to take some notes as you listen to this episode with Austen Hurley, high school basketball coach from the state of South Dakota. Hello and welcome to the Hoop Heads Podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here without my co-host Jason Sunkel tonight, but I am pleased to be joined by Austen Hurley, high school basketball coach, currently in between positions, having just finished up a season of coaching at the middle school level. Austen, welcome to the Hoop Heads Pod.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Excited to have you on. Looking forward to diving into all the interesting things that you've been able to do in your career. Let's start by going back in time to when you were a kid. Tell me a little bit about your basketball and athletic experiences. What do you remember about your first introduction to sports and to basketball in particular?
Yeah, so I really got into basketball because my dad was a pretty good basketball player in Canton, South Dakota. He was really good. He played at the University of South Dakota for a little bit as well. So I really got into basketball because like growing up, I would go to his like men's rec games and watch him play. And then he would like actually go from playing basketball to go work in a night job, things like that. So I really liked basketball, and my mom was a gymnast, so being athletes just kind of ran in our family. So yeah, just, playing basketball on the driveway growing up, and then, got to the high school level, played 4 years of basketball at Sioux Falls Lincoln here in South Dakota, which was very fortunate. Our senior year, we won a state title, which is pretty cool. We actually went undefeated. We're the only AA school in the state of South Dakota, or for AA. Other A schools have done it. So really love the game, have a really special connection with the group of guys that I played with there. We had 11 seniors that year, which was crazy amount of seniors to have, but we were very talented. And then, from there, just love the game of basketball. I was better at football than I was basketball, but basketball came naturally. I could see the floor very easily. Went to college, graduated, got a degree in education. And then I actually wanted to be a ref before I wanted to be a coach. I actually went to college and I did intramurals, and I actually was like, oh, I like this reffing thing. It's pretty cool. Thinking I was going to go do this high school officiating. And then actually my assistant principal, my first year in T, where I got my first job, he was like, hey, like, you want to do a volunteer coaching? Like, I've seen you ref basketball, but like, I know you're interested. Would you want to come over and help us? And I said, sure. First year there, we won a state title, which is pretty cool. And then we actually went to two more after that, and we won 2 out of 3, which is pretty cool. So, and then I did that for 6 years at T. We won 2 state championships out of the 6 years I was there. It was a lot of fun. And I had a bunch of great coaches, the coaches that mentored me my first 3 years before we got a new coach. They really grilled me hard on like, if you could bring us a set, these are the questions we're going to ask you. If you bring us an offense or a defense, these are the things we're going to ask you, and you have to look at this way before you bring this stuff to us, because we don't want to waste time having to go through this. So that's how I think and do with my coaching. And then I got a new coach my last 3 years there, and he was great. Drew Weber, he does a great job at T. And then I got my first head coaching gig at Parker. Was there for 2 years. It was a 35-minute drive. We had our third kiddo, so it was time just to be closer to home. So yeah, like right now I'm just kind of in between, just kind of coaching here and there, just seeing what the next step is right now.
Go back to when you're a kid and you're playing in high school, obviously with 11 seniors. Did you guys all grow up together? Was it the same group playing together from like second, third grade all the way up through the varsity?
No, actually, I live in I live in Harrisburg, but Sioux Falls, South Dakota is a town of 200,000 people. It's like 130 back then. We actually went to either the different middle schools or like started different, and then we just kind of come together. Majority of the guys did play on a travel team together, where like there's like maybe 3 or 4 of us that didn't, but we all knew each other growing up. We knew each other since 6th grade. And then we just kind of came together as freshmen. And then from there, it was just lights out. Like we were just playing really well. We had like 2 or 3 guys, 2 guys like moved up right away their freshman year. We had 3 of our guys move up their sophomore, or 3 of them were playing varsity at sophomore year. And then like our sophomore year, like I was on the sophomore team and we went 19-1 that year. It was we just have a really good bond. And when we got to our senior year, the coach was like, I'm not messing with these guys. Like we're letting these 11 guys be here. And he's like, I don't care what parents say. I'm going to have 11 seniors because we're not messing this up.
That's awesome that you had that perspective. Not every coach would have that. When you were playing, I always think there's 2 sort of routes to coaching. There's the guy who, from the time they're 8, 9, 10 years old, they're kind of the coach on the floor. They're the one drawing up plays for football in the dirt during the huddle. They're writing up stuff on a napkin as a basketball player, right? They're thinking the game as a coach. And then there's other guys that just are strictly focused on trying to be the best player they can be. And then at some point their playing career comes to an end and they kind of look around. They're like, basketball is over. What am I going to do? And then that's how they kind of fall their way into coaching. So would you describe yourself as somebody who, as a kid, do you feel like you were thinking the game as a coach already while you were playing, or was that something that came after your playing career was over?
Yeah, I would say I was more of a coach like throughout that. I was never like the tallest kid. I'm 6 foot. I went from like 5'7" to 6 foot from 8th to freshman year, and then I stopped growing. I was 6 foot from there on out. And then there's guys like, and I played the 3 and 4. In freshman year, sophomore year, and junior year, I was like, yeah, I could play with these guys. And then you get to varsity and you're like, I don't know if you ever, like when I was a junior, I don't know if you know the name Colton Iverson at all, but he played at Minnesota. He's 6'11". I stood next to that guy and I went, yeah, that ain't happening. Coach, you got to get someone else for this guy. Or like Cody Larson, he played at Iowa down in Florida. He was 6'8". Like I had to guard him for like a few minutes because our big was in foul trouble. I was like, this is a whole different ball game for someone that my size. And I was always the kid where I was raised by my mom, and my mom was always like, you need to know every position because you have no idea when you're going to get in the game. And that's always stuck with me. So like even when I played football and basketball, I knew every spot, everywhere on the floor. So then, like, when we'd be on the sidelines, they'd be like, man, like, what do I do on this one? I go, hey, guys, like, so when he does this, you got to do that. And then it's like, he's going to go here. And then, like, even my buddies are like, Hurley, like, how? How do you know that? I go, I don't know. I can't tell you. It's just, it's there.
That's awesome. And there are people that have that ability, right? That you can see something once or twice, and then you can dissect that in your mind and be able to identify, okay, somebody's got to go here, somebody's got to go there. And that's definitely, I think, a skill. Do you have the skill of being able to remember as a coach if somebody says, hey, what about the game you played 2 years ago against such and such? Do you remember what the score was or the situation? Do you have one of those memories where you can kind of pick out specific things from games that you either played in or coached? Because I know there are some guys, like I have a friend that I coached with. I was his assistant varsity coach for a number of years. And he could go back like 8 years and be like, hey, do you remember when we played against Hawken and the score was 42-40 and we had Steve with the ball over here and then he passed it to this guy? I'm like, dude, I don't even remember what I had for lunch yesterday, and you're calling out plays from like 8 years ago. Do you have that kind of memory in terms of just remembering games and things that happened in games you were coaching?
There's like key plays that like sit in my brain. Like when I was an assistant, my head was down all the time because I was running a possession chart. But there's like key plays that I have where, we had one kid, his name's Ethan Friedel. Like he was going down the court full sprint. It was in a semifinal game, and he did the Larry Bird. Like he was full court sprint. There was a loose ball, caught it, shot it from behind the backboard, tear dropped in, obviously a no call. And we're just like, what just happened? Like it's things like that, or it's like, we're playing a game, it was Freeman, small town when I was at Parker my second year, and we were down 3, and there was like 1 second left, and they threw the ball out of bounds on the sideline opposite our bench, and I'm yelling, flip, 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 which is just a horns flare and for my lefty shooter, and it set up perfectly. And he was 3 feet behind line. He caught it. He swished that thing. We went into overtime and then won in 2 more. It took us 2 more overtimes to win. Like those are the games or like plays that I can remember. But yeah, like when it's like, I got a buddy too. He's like, he can remember like NBA finals that happened 12 years ago. I'm like, dude, I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm always amazed by people who have that ability to just remember everything. And then sometimes I look at my friend and I'm like, dude, you're totally making this up. You don't really remember that game from 8 years ago in this possession in the third quarter when it was a game that we were up by 15 or down by 15 or whatever it is. I'm like, you're making this up. He's like, no, I'm not. I'm like, all right, I got to go back and watch some film and figure out whether he's lying or not at some point. But all right, I want to take you back to the transition from you think you want to be an official, you get asked to come be a coach, you step onto the sideline for the first time as a coach. What do you remember your feelings about coaching in that first month that you became a coach? What did you really like about it? What was an area that maybe you were surprised that you're like, ooh, I got to figure some of this stuff out because I thought I kind of knew what coaching meant, but man, there's some aspects of it that I didn't realize. So what was that first month like for you in terms of what were you good at initially? What were some things that you felt like maybe you had a learning curve to kind of get to where you wanted to go?
Yeah, my first like month, yeah, I can really remember that. I was a volunteer assistant. So I wasn't on payroll at our high school. I was the 4th coach. We had a varsity, a JV, and a C team, which is freshman, sophomore. And I was just like the assistant for the freshman, sophomore coach. But I remember though, like those first practices, like just being a sponge, I was just like, okay, like I know these coaches are good. They've had great success. Like they're been to the state tournament a bunch of times, which is really back then. It was really, really tough at the school we were at. Like you had to win your whole region. You had to win, to win a state title then, even in the A's now, you have to win 6 games in a row. Like, and it's tough. But like my first month there, it was a lot of like, okay, I'm going to listen. I'm going to be a sponge. And then I'm just going to echo what these coaches are doing. And once that happened, it was just kind of like, okay, fit into your role, be your own coach. Don't try to be them, be yourself and add some variety or some options to that. And I still remember my first year, it was drinking water out of a fire hose, but I was getting it. And I get things pretty quickly when it comes to a game of basketball. But like I still remember my first year, I'd be going to the JV coach, who was my assistant principal at the time. And I was like, hey, like, what do you think about this or like this and that? And it was like, okay, I'll look at it. And he never looked at it. He was like, you got to earn some trust here. And then eventually, like throughout the season, it went on. It was like I started to get some trust. They started, listening a little bit more, which was really cool. And then by the next season, it was like we've been together and we just knew what we were doing, and we were all on the same page. And our expectations for kids were all the same. Yeah, that first month was a little nerve wracking, but then I learned a lot from the JV coach. He was my mentor. He was dropping names of all these coaches that I have never heard about in my entire life. Like from South Dakota, you know who Don Meyer is. That guy. But he was like throwing out Rick Majerus, and I'm like, I have no idea. He's like, you need to go watch this video. I'm going to send it to you. Or he's like, hey, you need to go watch this from Jay Wright, or you need to read this article. And that's what I thought coaching was, is like, okay, I just got to learn what these old coaches have done, what these coaches are doing now, and like just kind of learn everything. And that's what I really learned that first month, was just like, man, I need to just really deep dive in this, and just really, if I want to be great and know how to be a certain offense or defense, I have to know that offense or defense. And that is literally what I got out of it. And then from there on, I was hooked. I was just like, okay, I learned this guy, I learned this, I learned this offense. And like, yeah. And then that's just how it went.
It's amazing how quickly when you get into a job that you realize what you thought you knew, you really know very, very little. You know just enough to be dangerous, right? And it's to the point where I know when I was a young coach, and I've said this on the podcast before, I wish that somebody had taken me a little bit deeper into, hey, you got to go and do what you just described, right? You got to go and study the people who have had success. You got to understand what they do offensively and defensively. And then that can start to shape your philosophy as you look at, well, hey, what do they do here? And what do I like about that? Or what would I maybe change or tweak about this that better fits what I'm trying to do or fits my personality? And I feel like that's something that as a young coach, I didn't do nearly enough. So if you're a young coach out there and you're just getting started in your career, the more you can study what other coaches do, whether that's through film, whether that's through having a mentor, somebody that you can talk to, X's and O's, culture, all those things, the more you can just immerse yourself in the game, the better off you're going to be in the long run in your career. I don't think there's any doubt about that. So as you go through and you're still in your role as an assistant coach, what did you learn about, obviously the trust factor is huge, right? As an assistant, you've got to earn the trust of the other members of your coaching staff and specifically your head coach. I think that's a huge piece. But when you think about what it means to be a good assistant, both when you were an assistant and then obviously once you become a head coach and you have assistants on your staff, in your mind, what do you think makes a good assistant coach? Give me 2 or 3 characteristics that you feel like make for a good assistant coach.
Well, obviously the first one's loyalty. Even if you don't align together, like maybe the same offensive or defensive principles or philosophies, you got to be loyal. It's like, okay, we're going to run this style of offense. Loyalty is a huge one. And, that's what we call respecting the absent. So like, if you're not around the head coach, you're not talking about the head coach and like saying, hey, with other coaches or teachers, like, I disagree with this. That's my second quality is trustworthiness and just being communication. So like, if there's something that you think's not working, I want an assistant coach to come to me and be like, hey, Coach Hurley, we got to scrap that, man. Like, we need to look at something else. And I'm like, and my thing with that, and I had an assistant coach that my first year came to me and was like, hey, this ain't working. I go, all right, you have a problem. What's the solution? And he told me, I don't know. I go, okay, that's fine. Go find one, bring it to me, because I didn't see the problem. You are, which is fine, but come tell me what the solution is. And I will look at it and then I'll make the final say. But that's what I really would like as assistant coaches is like, hey, if I had a staff of 3, which I would just be like, hey guys, you see a problem, you come talk to me. I'm not going to rip your head off or anything, but I'm just going to be blunt and honest. I have the last say, but give me a solution to it. If it's like, hey, we're having a tough time against a switching defense, okay, what's your solution to beat that one? Or if you think our offense is too slow when you speed it up, bring me a different one or a different style or drills that can really push our guys. And then I'm going to let them coach. Like, I'm not going to sit here and take over the mic and be like, hey, this is all me. I'm going to be like, hey, Coach Jimmy over here has a drill for us that's going to make us better for the next game. Listen up. You got the floor.
I love that. And I've had other coaches tell me that same thing about everybody can point out a problem. That's pretty easy to do. It's coming up with the solution to that problem. And when I talk to assistant coaches, I remember Chris Capco, who just got the job at Ball State, actually, where Rick Majerus coached at one point in his career. But when I had Chris on earlier this year, he told me that he always tries to make sure, just like you said, that he's bringing solutions to his head coach and not bringing his coach more problems. And when you bring them solutions, to your point, right, the head coach can either look at it and say, okay, that's a good solution, we're going to implement that, or, hey, I don't really think that's the right solution, we're going to go a different direction. And as an assistant, Chris said, hey, you've got to have a low ego, right? You can't take that personally. You're just trying to come with ideas. You're trying to come with things that you think can make the program better, with the understanding, as you said, that ultimately the head coach is going to make that decision. But I think if you are an assistant coach and you can come in with the mindset of, what I'm bringing to my head coach is solutions to the problems that I see, or solutions to the problem that the head coach has, or just making things that were on the head coach's plate disappear because I'm taking them over. I think those are all really important qualities for an assistant coach, both for anyone who is an assistant, or if you're a head coach, when you're thinking about trying to mentor your assistants and give them some guidance in terms of what makes them valuable. I think all those things we just talked about are really, really important. And so obviously you as an assistant coach, you're learning, you're going through, and you're trying to figure out who it is that you are as a coach. And then eventually for you, you get an opportunity to interview for a head coaching job, and you get the job at Parker. When you were preparing as an assistant, were you a guy that took notes and started putting things together of like, hey, when I get my own program, I'm going to do X, Y, Z? Were you taking things like, hey, this is what I like from this coach, let me put that here in this file, let me write that down, maybe here's something I don't like? Were you starting to put together that program philosophy while you were an assistant in order to prepare for that eventual head coaching job?
Yeah, and I was, and that's what I learned from my mentor coach, was he was like, anything you find, keep it, because you never know when you're going to have to use it. One time I was like, hey, I want to learn about the read and react offense. Do you have anything? He goes, come with me. We go into his office. He pulls out a drawer, and it's DVDs. It's like a Willy Wonka drawer. It just goes forever, and it's DVDs. And he goes, here you go. And then I was like, okay. And then so, like, watching the drills, and then I came back. I'm like, all right, I need to learn the blocker mover. Do you have blocker mover? He goes, give me my DVDs back. He pulls out even more. He goes, here's the blocker mover. Or, it's like, hey, we ran the dribble drive. And he goes, hey, you need to learn the dribble drive in order to coach with us. Here's the DVDs. And so I was like, okay, I need to start collecting these DVDs. Like, that's what I thought a good coach did, because these guys are good. And then for that, I was collecting things, but then as an assistant, I was actually reaching out to my mentor coach, but actually other coaches around the nation, of just anyone that I found on Twitter that was a head coach. And I was like, hey, I want to be a head coach. What are things that I need to do and prepare for to get that? And so coaches here's a resume builder. Here's what you need a resume for. Here's a coach's guide. So I created a coach's guide, and it's 15 pages long. So when I apply, I send it in, but it's got everything. It's what's our offensive philosophy? What's our philosophy on how to ride the bus? What to wear on the bus? What do we do on home and away games? I put a practice plan in there. I put in how we communicate to parents, captains, everything you think of, it is in that guide. And that is what has stuck with me. And I just keep updating it once I see oh, hey, I really like what this coach put on Twitter, about captains, and how he actually does a weekly captain. So he does a meeting every week, and it's this captain's change for each game. And I'm like, I love that, because if you're not performing as a captain for a week, as not scoring, not as far as playing, but just I have the 3 E's: energy, enthusiasm, and environment. So if you don't follow those 3 E's, you can't be a captain. But if you show me that in a week, you're going to be up for a captainship the next week. And then the biggest things was Don Meyer. Don Meyer's website, I don't know if you've ever been to it. It is so amazing. I steal so many things from there. So my second year at Parker, my assistant got me 25 binders, and we were binder guys. So I printed off every single set that we were throwing in. And I would stay in at practice, be coming in, I'd be handing them out, here's your sets. Or we'd have meetings before our late practice, and we'd sit down and be like watching film, and I'd have the breakdown of that film printed out. Or it was, hey, we have a poem that we're going to analyze, or hey, we're going to talk about brotherhood today. Things like that. Like those are bits and pieces that I took where I was like, hey, like it needs to be more about X's and O's. It needs to be more about like, these guys need to trust me and know who I am before they even can go on the court and perform, because if they don't know who I am, they're never going to trust me, and they're not going to allow me to be their coach. So just, yeah, as an assistant, I would just say like I took everything, even if I thought it was good or bad, like, oh man, maybe I do want that at some point, or it's just, hey, this coach I've seen blow up. I'm going to like, I've been on Zoom calls with coaches like that. I was an assistant. I was just like, hey, let me know what you do, because I just want to know what to do to get for myself prepared for a head coach someday.
So that leads to the next question for me, which I think is something that, especially in the world that we have today with social media, with just access to so much information, right? And I know that I'm not even coaching a team right now, really, but I sometimes feel like I have information overload where I'm scrolling through Twitter, or I'm looking through YouTube, and I'll find 25 things in a half hour. I'm like, oh, I love that out of bounds player. Oh, look at that press breaker. Oh man, that's a really good last second play, or whatever it is. And you can pull all those things together, or maybe I'll grab something that's culture related. And I can almost have too much. And so I've got to kind of take all that and figure out, well, what of that fits who I already am, whether that's philosophically, offensively, defensively, whether that's culture. So how do you, again, I understand completely the idea of, right, I'm collecting everything, especially as an assistant coach, right? I'm grabbing this, I'm grabbing that. So then once you become a head coach and you start to kind of figure out, well, who am I as a coach and what are my philosophies? How do you kind of go through then and pick and choose the things that are going to be important to you as a head coach that are going to fit who you are? If that question makes sense, just in terms of kind of dialing up all the stuff that you have.
Yeah, so I fell into that trap my first year as a head coach. I love the read and react offense. It was really good. Our tallest guy was only 6'2" at the time. So I was like, man, I need a 5 out, or, a 4 out Princeton kind of hybrid kind of deal. And I knew the Euro ball screen that Gonzaga used to run. And I kind of had two offenses going where I could switch it up if I felt that. And then as more and more I dived into things, and I slowed myself down, I was like, I'm doing too much. I need to have something that is simple, direct, and basically just lets kids play. So the more I was teaching and the more I was learning, and there are a lot of like good things that come out of social media. Like I see a lot of like, hey, teaching offense through play. Well, the best book I ever ran was Saba, the Anti-Fragile Offense. That taught me how, like I read that book after I was done head coaching. I was like, I haven't read this book, but Brian McCormick is all over it. I'm like, I'm going to read it. And it changed how I taught offense the entire time, and how the game of flow changes, where it's like, hey, don't call a set in live play, let them play. Or, hey, call a set after a dead ball. I learned all those things that I didn't really know. And I just had to slow myself down, and I had to take a look at my playbook and be like, I'm throwing this out. And then when I was reading the book, I was like, well, I need to have an offense where no matter what that defense do, we know what to do. Like, I don't need to run a different offense against a switching defense and then a man defense and then a zone defense. I need to have a man defense that can that can obliterate or beat any type of defense. If it's a switching defense, or if they're peel switching, or if they're icing ball screens or hard headed balls, like, we know what to do. And so by learning those things and listening to other coaches, like on podcasts and stuff, it's like, that is what I need. And so, and I found the greatest drill that I think has ever been invented. It's Canada 4v4, where you put 2 cones down and you have 6 zones, and players can't be in the same zone at the same time. I did it with 7th grade girls and our spacing was so amazing that I had people look at it, like I had my assistant AD come, was like, how'd you do it? Like, the spacing's tremendous. It's I showed him the drill. I go, this is the drill. And I did it with 8th grade boys basketball this year, and these are C&D guys, really low. Their spacing was great. It's just little drills that I found that it's like, hey, and then we played a lot of 3-on-3, all these things. But yeah, to go back to your question though, like, yeah, I had too much at one point, and then I stopped and I said, I need to slow down. Like, this needs to be something where it's simple. Like, I only have one press break, and it works for every single press break. I have one. We have one fast breakout. However, the secondary actions are in there that are natural. Instead of being like, hey, we're running this, and this. It's nope. We're gonna read what the defense gives us, and we're gonna go. So yeah, I've really like shrunk it down.
Well, obviously, I think when you talk about coaching in a practice setting with set plays and a bunch of things that the kids have to quote unquote memorize, right? In terms of patterns, or hey, I got to cut here, I got to do here in this moment. And then you're talking about the spacing and the conceptual offense, right? Where players are reading what's going on the floor and then they're making the decisions. And I think one of the things that coaches, especially coaches who have been around a long time, sometimes struggle with is, how do I give up that control as a coach and hand that control of the decision-making process to the players? And then I think the bridge in between that is, how do you teach that decision-making? And part of it, the 4 versus 4 Canada drill that you just described, right? Where you've got the 6 zones and you're trying to work on spacing. That's one way to help players make decisions, right? They know where they have to be, where they cannot be. And that's not you dictating, hey, you got to be here, you got to be there. That's them reading what's going on the floor and getting themselves to the right space. So when you're designing a practice to be able to help players to make decisions based upon what they're seeing on the floor from the defense, or conversely, if they're defending and they're playing against an offense, but what does the decision-making teaching process look like for you in a practice, as best as you can describe it, obviously, because, you know, we're not showing video or anything, but just as well as you can describe kind of what your practice philosophy looks like in terms of helping players to make better decisions on the court?
Yeah, so at the beginning of the year, you know, when kids are learning drills, we do a lot of 1v1 offense advantage, you know, ball in the back, ball on a hip, or high 5 start, what you see a lot of European style coaching going on. But when we get all these drills that these kids know by heart, we actually have 6 hoops in our gym. Each hoop has a different drill. And in those drills, it could be 1v1 advantage start, 2v2 high 5 start, 3v3 no dribble. It could, and then like the 2 other hoops in the middle of those are like free throws just to cool down. And then like our last hoop is like partner shooting, or we're playing 4v4 Canada, something like that. And we actually just call it stations. We set like a 3-minute timer up there. We press it. Every kid knows what to do. And we have what's called evil twins. And I think this is the coolest thing, is you get a guy that looks exactly like you, same build and same shape and or speed, and that's your evil twin. So like, for instance, if I got 2 6'5" guys, you know what? I'm not going to have them be on the same team during practice. You guys are going to go beat each other up the entire practice. And when we do sets, we come together. Even when we ran just offense stuff, because it was all the same, they went against each other. And I thought that was the biggest component of like finishing off 2 feet. We have a drill for that. And so our first setup in the practice is like first 18 to 20 minutes is stations. We blow, the horn goes off. They get 30 seconds to go to the next station. Horn goes again, and then they do that drill. What I think allows players to have a lot of success with that is they don't get to think about what just happened when they go to the next thing. Because in the game of basketball, if there's a turnover, you miss a shot or you make a shot, you don't get to think about, wait, what just happened down there that led me to that? It's, hey, I gotta go do this now. So I gotta go shoot free throws, or I gotta go do this layup drill, or the shooting drill, or a finishing drill. And we started players like see a click of like, they weren't worrying about the last drill, like, oh, I got blocked or I hung my head. It's like, no, you have to go do this now. And it was a really good conditioner too. 18 minutes of straight going, these guys were gassed. And so the free throws really helped break up. But then when we would go into the next set, it would be, I'm really big on kind of like when you're teaching multiplication or addition, you got to have building blocks. So then after that, we go into like, all right, hey, we're going to do 2v2 no dribble or 2v2 high five start. Or hey, we're going to do 3v3 disadvantage. But it's always offense versus defense. We're never on air. The only time we're on air is if like we need to get shots up and just see the ball go through the hoop, or maybe working on a skill of like come to a jump stop, a stride stop, step through, spin moves, whatever the case may be, or if we're teaching a transition offense. But then when we do sets, like when I teach sets, I try to teach on air of like what it looks like, but I always end up throwing a defense in because I'm like, you guys need to see who's going to be screening. Right. So a lot of it is, and then we always finish a drill. Like I always do something a 5v5 full court. One thing that I love to do is if you have a lot of guys on your team and you're just trying to get them reps and you're kind of like, man, like I got to give kids chances, but I got my starting 8, but I got 12 other dudes or whatever, is 3-minute games are the best thing. I'll throw 5 players out, 3-minute, 5v5, we're going to play for 3 minutes. Okay, that's up. Next 10 guys you're on, and then allows me to talk to those 10 or 5 guys or whoever I need to talk to. I let the assistants go do their thing. They're in charge. I'm going to talk to them. And then, boop, you guys are back on. And then, or we're doing what's called racer drill, where it's 5v5, and it is literally you start with the ball in one court, you go down. If you miss, the other team gets a rebound. There's a new 5 actually coming in on offense. And those are kind of how our practices go. It's really just a buildup of skill development, small-sided games. Now let's put it all together. And they're tired, so we don't run lines. We only run lines if it's a punishment, which kind of try to get away from, but it's like part of like that coach, like we gotta, but it's like that's how we build it. Is literally it could be 1v1, 2v2, 3v3, or 4v4, and then we end the game or end the practice 5v5 where we're working on sets based on a balance play, special situations. And the reason we do that at the end is because they're tired. And we want them to be able to be tired and play. We don't want to be fresh and play 5-on-5 because we want to be tired playing 5 because when it's fourth quarter, I want you to know those sets where it's like, oh, I just go here. Don't have to think.
Makes total sense. I want to go back to the station piece of it because I think that's a really interesting way to structure your practices. When those stations are going on and the kids, obviously, as you said, you've taught them what they're supposed to do at each spot so they know, so they're going at each other. As you're watching that as a coaching staff and you're seeing decisions being made, how are you remembering some things that maybe you want to point out to a kid? Because I'm assuming you're not stepping in and stopping when it's such a short period of time. You're not going in and giving them a minute explanation of, hey, this decision or this is whatever. You're maybe talking to them as an entire group after those stations are over, or you're pulling one kid aside. But just how do you evaluate what's going on and make sure that it doesn't just devolve into, okay, we're doing this drill, but we're not necessarily getting anything out of it? How do you make sure you're still, quote, coaching and making sure the kids are getting out of those stations what you want them to get out of it, if that question applies here?
Yeah, so in a perfect world, I would love to have have 4 coaches on the floor, and every coach is in charge of a drill. So you put together your drill, you're going to teach that drill, and you sit at that hoop. Now, when I design these, it is either 1v1 or 2v2. We sometimes do 3v3, but I always want to make it where those 2 players that just went aren't going right away. They're coming off. So like I'll stand at a drill and I'll look at like, okay, I need to go help, Timmy out over here. Okay, I can pull the Timmy out and be like, hey, there's 6 other guys at the hoop. They can keep going. And I can just be like, hey, that last time here, remember when you came off 1 foot, what happened? He's like, well, I came off 1 foot and I kind of got bumped and I missed. Okay, so what do you need to do next? Come off 2 feet. That's it. 10, 20 seconds, we go. I don't spend a minute with a player because their attention span, they just want to go play. But the fact that a kid like that can go and be like, hey, I came off 1, he bumped me like you said, and I missed. Okay, so what are you going to do next? Come off 2. And then boom, he's right back in the drill. And I make sure after I'm done talking, he gets the next rep. So it's fresh in his mind. and boom, does that. So in my thoughts with that, it's either got to be 3 minutes or 4 minutes. 4 minutes is kind of the sweet spot with those stations. But a lot of the times is we want to make sure there's enough players where we can pull a kid or two off to the side, talk to them, and let them get back into that drill right away. Not be like, hey guys, whoa, 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 whoa. Now, granted, if they're screwing around and not getting anything out of it, then yeah, coach needs to step in and be like, hey, you six, you need to stop. We need to talk about the purpose of this drill because it's not a goof around time. This is a skill development, making you better, making our team better. And then if you have to stop, and then you just tell the players, hey, you just wasted 2 minutes of your time because you weren't doing what you're supposed to be doing. And that's really been a key factor. And kids love it because they're bopping, they're going.
Yeah, I love the idea of structuring the drill so that you can remove a kid from the drill, talk to him, and then send him right back in. And the drill doesn't have to stop while you pull that kid out to be able to talk to him and give him some instruction. It's a really simple technique, but it's one that I can already see the value in it. As I'm picturing your stations in my head and what that looks like, I can already picture, hey, all right, here's a group where let's say it's 3-on-3, and at that 3-on-3, you have 8 kids there. And so, yeah, somebody does something and, hey, we're going to point that out to you. We're going to pull you out. And meanwhile, somebody just jumps in and the drill continues and they're getting as much out of it as they possibly can. So I can certainly, without question, see the value in that. Tell me a little bit about just how you go about preparing a daily practice plan. Are you a guy that sits down with a pen and paper and writes out your practice plan? Are you doing it on the computer, putting it in Google Drive? Just what's your process for putting together a practice plan? Because I think everybody has different methods and different ways that they go about doing that. Do you like to do it with your assistants, by yourself? Just walk me through the process.
Yeah, so if possible, if I, like when I was a head coach at Parker, I had one assistant. I made the practice plans, but one of my assistants was my second year. I had a new assistant. He was actually my superintendent of the school, and he had 12 years of coaching experience. And we just couldn't find anyone, so he was my assistant. But like, I was like, hey, like after every practice, we're like, it's fresh in our mind. Tell me what we need to work on. What did you see in our 5-on-5? And he's like, we need to do this, this, and this. Or like, hey, okay. And then I'm like, tell me the positives. What are the positives first? What do we do well that we need to continue doing drills on that builds on it? And then are there drills that we just need to scrap because they're just fluff? And that's when I really like to do it, of like just quick, hey, coaches, like give me just a quick, like what are things that we need to be better at? And then if a coach says like, hey, when I was an assistant, you go, hey, I think we need to be better at our zone offense. And I'm like, okay, what do you think we need to do? Hey, I got some sets that we could put in. Okay, I'm going to set a time for you tomorrow. It's going to say DeBoer zone sets. You get that time. I'm going to go down with the freshman. You get the varsity. And I'm going to go work with the freshmen during this time. And the freshmen loved it because they're like, ooh, Coach Hurley's down here, the head varsity coach. Like, yeah. And then with that, though, is if I had a good big staff, it'd be, hey, we're all sharing this Google Doc or a spreadsheet. And I would give roles to my assistants of like, hey, what is your best trait? So like if I had a nice young coach who's like maybe just out of college ball or like knows really good moves for kids to learn or is really good, like can actually show kids how to do a Eurostep without tearing their ACL like I'd be like, hey, you're our skill development guy. I'm going to give you 30 minutes every single day. I'm not going to touch this. That is all you. And then if I had coaches that was like, hey, like my strengths are sets. Like I know sets for this. Okay, you're going to have to give me all your sets. We're going to have to sit down and go over which ones we like. And then we can build off whenever we play a new team, like which ones you like. But then I'd be like, hey, this is your time. You're going to teach that. And then let's say my JV coach be like, hey, you and I are in charge of the offense and defense, the whole meat and potatoes here. Okay, you and I are going to have to be on the same page of like after practice real quick. What do we need to work on? What do we need to do? And then that's kind of how I am. I like to share it out because I can't do it all. There's no way like that I can do it all. Like when I was at Parker, I had one assistant each year. I was doing everything, and burnout hits you when you're the guy and you have to make every practice plan. And when you're watching film till 1 a.m. trying to prepare for 2 or 3 teams in a week, like that's kind of the thing. And like, yeah, when I'm like watching film, I have a big 75-inch TV downstairs. I'm sitting on my couch and I'm like, all right, this team does this. And I have a spreadsheet on how I scout teams, like how I look for it, like how do they defend a ball screen? How do they defend off ball screens? What do they do after a free throw? Are they doing a release, or are they going back in zone? What are they doing? And I have all that, and I just fill that out, and then it's in my mind. I'm like, okay, we need to do this to beat them, this, and that's basically how I come with a practice plan.
If you had to ballpark how much film you're watching, let's say during the season to prepare for an opponent, what would you say that number is? And then we'll talk a little bit about the off season, but just in terms of in season, if you're going to prepare for an opponent, how much film are you watching of that opponent to get yourself prepared?
I'll watch the game depends on how many teams we have in a week. If we have two, depends how many games. If I have a couple days in front, I'll watch that game about 2 times, because the way I've organized my spreadsheet, I can watch a game, pause, and be like, okay, first quarter, they're a blitzing team. Because, coaches have their tendencies. And we don't shy from it. It's, hey, like, oh, okay, against a ball screen, they blitz, or they're icing, or they're hedging, or they're switching. And that's when I put in my notes. And then if I'm watching the game, it's like, okay, off ball screen, they're chasing. Okay, got to know that, because then we can tell, like, hey, they're chasing. We need curls. We need to practice our curls. So when we do 2v2 ball screening, we have to know, hey, offense or defense, you're going to be chasing, or hey, they're going to be switching. So then we go through that. I'm very fortunate enough to have a brain where I can watch a game in one time and I can tell you what they do. And there's times I go and watch just games just for fun, and I can tell you within the first quarter, I know exactly how that team's going to beat you, or I know how that team is going to do. And then I always like the adjustments at halftime, like, oh, they went to a 2-3. All right, what are they going to do out of this 2-3? So with film, depending on our play, like we had an in-season tournament when I was at Parker. So it'd be like, hey, we watch film. We have 3 days to prepare for this tournament. I watch a bunch of film, try to get as much as I can, maybe 2 or 3 films. And that's the difference too, is like if I have 3 films on one team from different teams, I'm going to watch every single film, and I watch it to the full length. I don't stop, because I don't want to get caught sleeping. You know what I mean? Like, I want to make sure, like, oh, they ran a 1-3-1 one time. They ran it one time. They could come out in there. And so we kind of go over that. And then when it's a quick turnaround, hey, you got to play on a Friday after a Thursday. You got to watch the game from who your opponent was. You got to get that coach to send it over to you. It's 10 o'clock at night, and I'm sitting here watching that film, and I watch it, 1.5 times. And then, during the day, during my playing period, I'll watch it over again. And then it's repeat. Then it's like, hey, we have a Saturday game. Okay. And it's at noon. Okay. Well, I'm up at 6. I'm getting breakfast, and I'm watching the game from last night, and I have to watch our game at the same time. So it's about, I watch a lot of film during the season. I don't watch very much TV, and it's a lot late nights. It's like, I got kids. So it's like they go to bed. My wife goes to bed. She's like, you coming to bed? I'm like, I got to watch this film. I got to make sure we can beat this team tomorrow. He goes, we're 2-10. I got to figure something out.
The after the kids and the wife go to bed time is definitely a time that I can relate to. I spent many, many hours working late at night on the podcast, for sure, when everybody at my house went to bed. I'm a little lucky now because I retired in October, Austen. So now I have some time during the day to be able to do some actual work instead of just being at school all day. So, but I can definitely relate to the idea that everybody in the house goes to bed and you got some time to yourself, and then you become a vampire, right? You don't sleep. You're functioning on way less sleep than you thought you ever would before you became a parent. Let's put it that way. Let me ask you this about film. Let me ask you this about film. How much of the prep work from the film do you then share with the players? What pieces of information that you take out? There's obviously a lot that's important to you as a coach, but then what are the things that you take from the information that's important to you that then you share with the players, whether that's through actually showing them film clips of things that their opponent might do, or just talking or designing things in practice to mimic some of the stuff that they may see in a game? How much of the film work that you do you share with players?
So I try to clip as like maybe 30 minutes or less with players that I'm going to show them. However, through a lot of trial and error with kids watching, because I look at times like how long is these kids watching film? Well, my assistant was like, well, are they even actually watching the game, or are they just watching themselves? So I was like, we had a weekly meeting. So at our weekly meeting, I straight up asked them, I said, hey guys, do any of you know actually how to watch film? And they go, no. I'm like, thank you for being honest. I don't want you to say yes and just give me that. I go, so what do you guys look for when you watch a film? They go, well, I watch myself. I said, okay, so are you just like kind of watching to see like your highlights? They're like, yeah, kind of, this and that. I'm like, okay. I go, so here's what we're going to do today for our weekly meeting. I'm going to teach you how to watch film the way I do. I printed out my form that I have, and I gave everyone a form and a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen, whatever, writing tool. And I said, and it's not very big. It's, a little like, just, are they a switching team? Or are they a man team? What do they do against screens, off-ball screens, on-ball screens, XYZ. And then like, what's their formation of their offense? What's their style of defense? And then what's their fast break? And it's just, they go, oh, this is what you look at. I go, I literally sit down with this form and watch film, and I literally write in what they have, or I type it. So they go, can we watch like a quarter and do it? I said, yes, that's what we're going to do. So we watch a quarter, and I have to, pause. It's a lesson. Like I'm teaching them. And I said, hey, did anyone see a ball screen in the first minute here? They go, yeah, coach, I did it. What did they do? Well, they switched. I said, yeah, they switched. So did you write that down? So everyone's like, okay, I got to write that down. And then it was like, okay, what were they in? And then I would pause it like another 10 minutes or like 5 minutes in. And I go, okay, what's their fast break look like? What do they do with their big? And they go, well, he's running up and down the court like we do. I go, yeah, so he rim runs. Okay, so you need to write that down. Would they have a rim run? Or, now they're trying to do a two-sided break, which has kind of been a new fad with transition offense. But it's a lot of those, like I had to teach players how to watch film. And the players are just like, I can never watch basketball the same. And I go, welcome to my world. I can never watch a game and enjoy it. And so that was what I had to do, though, to get them to understand like how you actually watch film. So when I do clips, they understand. Because even if I did clips and said, do you see how they blitz? Because I never tell them how to beat. I always ask players, how do you defeat a blitzing ball screen or a soft hedge screen or a switching screen or an ice screen? And I always ask them that. And at first they're like, well, we don't know. Like you're the coach, you have to tell us. So then after trial and error, they finally figured out, okay, blitzing screen, we don't actually screen, we slip. Against blitzes, we slip, we ghost it, or we do a flip. And I go, yes, you guys are understanding it. My kids may not have been the skilled at Parker, but they knew basketball by the end of it, and I loved it. And we actually grew really close because they love those film sessions. They got paper, pencil. They're sitting here going, hey, I know the answers to these. This is easy.
That's good stuff, Austen. I think it's 100% spot on in terms of, I think every high school coach should do exactly what you just described, right? To be able to teach kids. Because a lot of times we say, hey, you got to watch the film. And kids may watch the film, but I'm betting that 98%, 99% of kids who sit down to watch the film do exactly what you just described your kids were doing before you showed them how to watch film properly. They're just looking for, hey, when's that shot coming up that I made? Or, hey, when's that nice pass I made? Or when am I going to get that steal? And that's what kids are watching for. I know that with both my kids who play, so I have a son who's playing, he's a sophomore at Ohio Wesleyan. And then I have a daughter who's a sophomore in high school. And with both of them, when I first started watching film with them, and I'd talk them through, and I'd ask them same way, ask them questions like, hey, what do you see here? What are you looking at? And they saw absolutely nothing besides whatever they were doing. Like if there was an action that involved them, they might be able to recognize what was going on. But if there was an action that happened away from them on the film, they had no idea how that impacted what was going on in the game or how that affected what they were doing. They just didn't see it. And so you really had to stop and point out like, hey, here's you, but look at what's going on over here that's about to set up what's going to happen to you or what's going to get you open or whatever. And so when they start to see that, now you not only can learn from what you're doing, but now you can also learn from your teammates. And then I think the most important part is you get to start to see the big picture, right? Like what you're talking about, where your guys are writing down, well, what does this team do? And then how can we as a team react to that in terms of how we approach either attacking their defense or being able to guard that other team's offense? And I think it's so underrated because, as you well know, right, film is so valuable in terms of being a learning tool, not just for coaches, but as a player, you can learn so much and increase your basketball IQ by leaps and bounds if you understand how to watch film. And I agree with you 100% that I just don't think most kids have any idea how to watch it.
Oh, they really don't. And, like when you're talking about like setting up plays and that, it's like once I taught players how to do that, they were understanding like, hey, there's 4 other guys on the court that I need to know what they're doing. So that way I'm not cutting when another guy's cutting, or, hey, I know my friend likes to come off these screens a lot. Like, how do you like to get open? I think that's a big piece too, is like, you got to ask your players, how do they like to score? So like, for instance, when I was an assistant, that was a big thing I learned too, was we had a really good player. His name's Noah Friedel. He plays over in Europe right now. He played at James Madison University. He was great, phenomenal athlete. But we sat down with him and we're like, how do you like to score? Do you like to come off ball screens? Do you like to come off ball screens? Do you curl? Do you like to pop? Or do you just want to have the rock in your hand and make something work? And, he sat down. He goes, I love to come off ball screens. He goes, because when I come off a ball screen, if it's a switching team, I'm going to get some small guy on me and I'm just going to take him to the hole, or I'm going to shoot a 3 over him. And he's like, or if they don't switch, I have that beautiful curl for a layup. And it was like, that stuck out to me too, is like, you got to ask your starting 5 or your best players, like, how do you guys like to score? Like, what do you like? Like, if they want to have some freedom and they like to this, don't run a continuity. Or if it's like, hey, like, I like to know where the next guy is going to be, or like, I like to have a spot, like, this is my spot. Okay, maybe a continuity is your thing and you got to find the right one. But I think that's valuable too, is just asking your players like, hey, where do you like to score from?
Have you always been somebody who coached by asking questions? Because I think back to my experience as a player a long time ago, Austen, but also in the early years of my coaching career. And I don't think that coaching with questions was really a thing. It was more, if I'm the coach, I'm saying, this is what we're doing. Here's where you're going to be. Here's where you're going to be. I don't really remember while I was playing a coach ever asking me, hey, you just turned it over. What did you see there? Or, hey, that broke open. Why did it break open? Or, hey, what do you like to do? I don't remember a coach ever asking me a question, but almost every single thing that you've described in how you're doing it and how you're interacting with players, you're describing yourself asking your players questions. So is that something that just came naturally to you? Is that something that you've developed consciously over time? Or I'm just curious because I think it's such a valuable piece of helping players to develop their IQ and decision making.
So that was a big piece in like when I was like teaching, right? So my mentor coach was also my assistant principal. And so he was always be like, hey, you got to get your craft better. You got to do this. And he's like, the value of questioning, like I teach math, is so important. Like, hey, how did you come to that answer? Why did you do that? This and that. And then I'm like, I'm going to carry this over into the basketball court. And so one thing I've always done is like, if I pull a player off to the side, and even if they turn the ball over, or maybe they are having a tough time with a set, I pull them off to the side and I don't embarrass them. I say, hey, coach, you got this. Or like, hey, guys, keep playing. And I always have them stand shoulder to shoulder next to me. I never stand face to face, because it's actually research. If you stand face to face someone, they get defensive. But if you stand shoulder to shoulder, you're a team. And so I always put my arm around them, around their waist. And then I always go, hey, so can you tell me like what's going on? Like, why are you having a tough time with this set? Can you tell me what you're confused about? Or like, hey, why'd you turn that ball over there? Like, hey, why didn't you do this? And I've always done that because I was always yelled at as a player, like, Hurley, come on, let's go. Like, you got to know this. And it's like, I didn't care for that. And like, I didn't feel like I learned anything. I feel like I learned how to tune out yelling rather than saying like, hey, like, I'm learning on the court, because that's what it is. It's learning. I used to be a yeller as a young coach. I am not. I got rid of it. I was like, I only yell when energy, effort, and enthusiasm is not followed, the three E's that we talk about. When those three things are not followed, that's when I yell. But even then, we stop, we come in, we take a break, and like, guys, why? Like, I asked the whole team, why aren't we showing energy? Why aren't we doing this? And then they're kind of like, what do you mean? I'm like, and I go, am I wrong? Like, I go, be honest, am I wrong? Are we not showing energy? And they're usually like, no, coach, we're not. So I go, what do we need to do to have energy in practice? What do you guys need? And a lot of guys will be like, coach, we need some tunes. I said, done. Next practice, we had a speaker. And it was like, just listening to your players and like just asking that question is so valuable in coaching. Because to be honest, so my principal now has a great thing that he taught me was conversation before consequence. So if my player turns the ball over, my player forgets a set, my player doesn't show energy, effort, or enthusiasm, or isn't a part of the family, I'm going to pull them off to the side. I'm going to ask them, can you tell me why you're doing this? And that's the conversation. And if they straight up say, I don't care about this, and I said, all right, there's the bench. You can find it there. I'm not dealing with this right now. I'm going to focus on the other guys that are on the court right now that want to show those three E's, or the other 12. And then we'll have a conversation later about, we want you part of this team, or this and that. It just drives a lot of like, man, this guy's not rude or disrespectful. Like, he actually cares and he wants me to do well.
It makes so much sense when you consider just human nature and the way that we react to different types of instruction. And I can just completely, again, like I told you when I was picturing in my head your practice with the stations. And now when you're talking about standing side by side with the player, I can picture that. I can picture how a kid can be much more comfortable with you standing next to them with your arm around them, as opposed to you going face to face, where even if the conversational tone is exactly the same, you're just body positionally, it just looks different. And I could see how a kid would react better to the side to side as opposed to the face to face. And I think everything that you and I have talked about tonight keeps taking me back to a word that I've used a lot on the podcast with lots of different coaches that I think applies to your situation completely. And that's being intentional about what you do, right? You could have a conversation with a kid, and maybe sometimes you're standing side by side with them. Maybe sometimes you're face to face because you're just kind of doing whatever it is that you're doing. But what I hear you talking about, and what I think the best coaches do, is they try to be intentional in every aspect of their coaching, right? So you're intentional about the way you set up stations to make sure that it's continuously flowing. And those kids are not only getting basketball skill development, but they're getting the conditioning. You're intentional about watching film. We're not just going to sit down and have 12 kids in chairs looking at a screen, but not processing anything. We're going to give them a piece of paper and a pencil. We're going to actually teach them how to watch film. And then you're talking about having a conversation. I'm going to intentionally stand next to a kid because I think my message is going to get across to them. And I think the best coaches, Austen, I think that's what they do. I think they're very intentional about how they design everything around your program. And that's what I keep coming back to in every aspect of what we've talked about in terms of building a program. That intentionality that you have is obviously coming through. And I want to extend that to another area that's more of an intangible area. And you kind of touched on it when you were talking a little bit about the captain's idea of a weekly captain. But how do you think about leadership in your program and developing leaders amongst your team, and then conversely, or together with, developing each kid's leadership and giving them an opportunity to step back? Because a lot of times coaches complain, I don't have any leadership, and then they never give any space for the kids to actually lead anything. So I'm guessing, based on our conversation, that you've got some really good ideas about how you try to instill and build leadership with your kids.
Yeah, so if I ever get a chance to have my own program again, be a head coach, having a weekly meeting before school on Mondays would be the number one thing that we would do, even before season, do it in preseason, during the season, even after season, just of like, because you're teaching, like when it's like, what's leadership? I need leaders. Like, we always had that coach, I need leaders. Well, I came from a single mom household. Like, I don't know what a leadership of a male is. Like, I just know my mom. And I was like, no one ever taught me that. I learned from my mentor coach. I'm like, what leadership is. He had to teach me it. And then that was the thing of like, I need to teach these kids how to do it. And it was intentional of like our weekly meetings was, hey, what's leadership, guys? A lot of these kids didn't know. I'm like, okay, that someone stepped, and I had to teach them, like, it's someone who steps up, speaks their voice with their chest, and does the right thing when no one's looking. And I said, that's how we're going to build this team, and anyone can be a leader. And I said, it doesn't matter if you score 30 points a game or you don't play at all. Anyone on this team can be a leader. And if someone chirps up and says something that is correct and to the point, we do not bash it. If it meets our team philosophy, we'll agree on it and we'll approve of it. And we constantly, like, I'd put kids in uncomfortable positions, like, hey, what do you think about this? And they're like, wait, what? Like, yeah, what do you think about our offense? And they're like, I really don't know. I'm like, well, okay. Or like, what is leadership? I'm like, hey, how much trash did you pick up today on the way to class? Because there's always garbage. There's pencils. How many pencils did you pick up? Well, I don't know. Okay. I go, person that brings me the most pencils by the end of by practice today, okay, skips conditioning. Hallway was cleared. Like, and I had kids fighting over pencils. Or it's the fact of just before, like, I've had met my team the first time at Parker and I botched it. I went in with that drill sergeant kind of XYZ. Here's the deal. If I could redo it, I would have my team meeting and then I would tell all my upperclassmen to stay, let the freshmen, sophomores leave. And I would sit down and ask them, what do you love about this program? What have you loved? What has been working so great? Because I'm coming in here where it's someone else's program that you've been with for 4 years, 3 years, that you're going to have me for 1 year. What's something that you've loved that this coach built that I can continue to do? And then I always ask, what are things that the coach did or what you didn't like that I could hopefully help with that? And I did that with my seniors. I had 6 of them. And the 4 that started for me all year, like, I still remember we talked, and it was before the season started, and they're like, hey, we can't do 3-hour practices. We can't do 2.5-hour practices. I said, done. We won't do that. And it's like, what we didn't like is if we weren't getting a drill, we weren't doing this. Like, he just kind of kept going. I'm like, and I'm not trying to like say like, hey, I'm trying to bash a coach. Like, that's never my intention with the players. I'm like, I'm not trying to hear you bash a coach. I'm just trying to hear what you didn't like and maybe what I can understand from. And I was like, okay, like, however, I said there may be times, like, if there's a set play, we may need to go a little bit longer and throw something out. So that's probably what that coach had intention, but there might be times we have that. But it's also giving voice. Also, I always give them a voice of like those seniors of like, hey, what are we wearing to games? What are we wearing, white socks or black socks? But everyone's wearing the same sock. We're not looking ugly out there. Okay. What undershirt is everyone wearing, or XYZ? And that's kind of that leadership role with that. And actually what I do to kind of find who my leaders are on the team is I do Don Meyer's foxhole test. I don't know if you ever heard about it, but basically is they draw a circle on a piece of paper. They're in a foxhole. We talked about foxholes in World War I and World War II. And Don Meyer said, okay, you're in the middle of the foxhole. Okay. The guy, like, you're going to point an arrow of where you're going. The guy in front of you, or you're in the front of the foxhole. You have a guy to your right, left, and behind. And I kind of spun it where it's the guy on the right is a guy that relies on you. Who's that guy that relies on you? Because that's your strong hand. Like, you support him. And it's like the guy on the left, maybe you're not left-handed and you're weak. That's a guy you lean on the team that, like, when you're down or you need support, who's that guy? And then I go, the guy behind you is the guy you trust the most not to shoot you in the back and to protect you so you don't get shot in the back. Who's that guy? And they really think about it. And then what I do is I collect these papers and then I do a tally of who's all the guys in the back. And I said, okay, those are guys I'm going to look after for leadership. And then I ask them, where do you think you land in the foxhole for someone else on this team? are you the guy on the right, left, or are you the guy in the back? And I kid you not, these kids were like, what? What? Like, you're asking me to like actually think about myself? And I'm like, yeah, like, where do you think you are? And then I always tell them, I go, where do you guys want to be in the foxhole? They go, in the back. I said, how do you get there? And it really, that we do the foxhole throughout the season, and it changes. Guys move around, and it's kind of fun to see them because they all want to be in the back.
I love that. I love the idea of the weekly meeting where you're having these types of conversations that so often practice time is at a premium. Everybody's busy. It's easy for something like that to kind of fall by the wayside, right? Because we got to get on the court. We've got to do this. We got to prepare for this opponent. We got to get better at this skill. But I think so much of building a team and building a culture and building leaders happens in those moments, whether it's in a meeting, whether it's the 5 minutes before practice, it's the 5 minutes after practice, it's during the stretching. It's all those little conversations that you're having with kids. And especially when you're doing it, like I said earlier, intentionally about what you're trying to accomplish, I just think you can create such a positive environment that those environments translate to winning. Now, obviously, you have to have some talent in order to be able to win. But when you put good talent together with a good culture, with a good environment that can be created by building the types of relationships that you're talking about, that's, I think, where the art of coaching comes in, right? There's a science to it, and that's the watching film, the breaking down, the X's and O's, and being able to do all that stuff. And then there's the art of being able to take what you know scientifically about the game and actually get the kids to buy into it and do what you're asking them to do and be enthusiastic about it and all that stuff. And it's just, that is much more difficult to actually do than it is to talk about, right? Being intentional helps, and planning and doing all the things that you describe to learn and improve your craft. And then there's still an art to taking all that stuff that you know and standing in front of a group of kids and making it work and figuring it out. And I think that's when I think about what is so fun about coaching, that's the challenge, right? Of taking this group of individuals, getting to know them, and then building them into a cohesive team that's going to, again, be in the foxhole with one another and be the person in the back that is supporting everybody that's out there. That's the secret sauce to me.
Yeah, and it doesn't need to be long. Like, I've talked to coaches about this. Like, where do you find the time? I go, 15 minutes before school starts. They come to my room. We hang out. You know, they get to see me at the beginning of the week. You know, we get to start with the right foot off, or, you know, maybe it's 20 minutes. It doesn't need to be long. You know, that's the part of it is, if you want to do 30, you do 30. If you want to do 20 or 15. The kids are there regardless. They're sitting, hanging out with their friends regardless before school. Why not have them come in the beginning of the week, even if it's a game day, and be like, hey, we play St. Mary's today, guys. All right, this is the stuff we're looking for, but I just really want to focus on us. And like, this is our motto today. This is what we're doing. And I just really want to connect with you guys before the week started. And I think that's just a viable thing of like, just take 15 minutes, bring donuts, take it out of your salary. Like, either you pay for it or you ask the school to help you out, or you use it in your fundraise. Get donuts. Those kids will be there early to get those donuts.
There's no doubt. Donuts are a great incentive. There's no question about that. You break out a box of donuts and somehow the line form like ants coming to get to that donut box. There's no question about that. I want to ask you about a topic that I think typically is on the mind of a lot of high school coaches, and that's parents of your players and trying to get those parents to be engaged, positive members of your team environment, as opposed to some of the nightmare stories that you sometimes hear or read or see. So when you think about trying to engage the parents on your team, to encourage them to be supportive of their own player, but you as a coach, the team as a whole, the other players besides their kids on the team, what are some things that have worked for you in terms of engaging parents and that have made it a good environment for both them and their kids?
Yeah, I think you need to be really intentional with communication early. Like, I send out my coach's guide. It has my philosophy. It tells everyone what I'm about. I send that out. I always tell them the parent meeting, hey, I'm going to email it to you. You can send it to your delete file, or you can feel free to read it. But I go, it's a little long, but you can read it. It's what I'm about. But I actually do an email for every single player that I have. I intentionally send an email the first week of practice to the kids' parents, letting them know how great their kid is and how respectful they are. And because you're going to have that time where something wrong happens. You get into it with them, they go home and they're going to be like, Coach Hurley said this, and the parents get on the email. Well, you know what? If my first interaction with the parent, either a phone calls are amazing too. Like, I know sometimes as teachers and parents, like our coaches, we want to get rid of the phone calls. I'm afraid of a parent yelling at me. You know what? If I call them saying, and hey, so-and-so, this is Coach Hurley. I just wanted to let you know your kid crushed it at practice today. They were flying up and down the court. They were so respectful. I am so honored to coach them and be with them, because then when the hard conversation comes back and where the kid's like, man, Coach Hurley ain't playing me right now, this stinks, or XYZ, that parent is going to be like, this is a nice guy. I'm going to just be like, hey, Coach, just want some clarification, XYZ, or hey, my kid said you said this. Is this true? And I always say, hey, I'll give you, I said, let me talk with your son. Let me talk first with them, and then let's clear the air first, and then XYZ. Because with high schoolers, they're venting to parents. And what I tell parents too is, there's going to be a time your kid is going to hate me. They're just really going to be mad at me because I chewed them out, or I'm not playing them as much as they like. They are venting to you. They're not telling you to email me. If you want to email me about that stuff, it doesn't fly about playing time. I said, if I disrespect your kid in any way, shape, or form, you have any and all means to email me or go talk to the AD. But I go, you will never have that, because it's not going to happen. Because I've had my ups and downs of a parent email, and I've had a meeting, and by the end of it, the parent's like, we're good. I said, okay, thank you. But that communication piece is huge. And even doing a couple calls or emails of just even that 30 seconds that kid gets in, you're up 30, you're down 30, and they make that bucket, and it's just, you give a high five to that kid, and then you send an email to your kid, that kid's parents, and saying, hey, I have it on film, I'm going to clip it, I'm going to get it to you, or XYZ. It's just, you got to open up the communication. There's so many times where we're like, no, I don't want to be by parents because they're going to come after me. I used to be that way. Nope, I'm not going to even eat in the same town. I'm not going to be anywhere. What I do after games, I always find my players' parents or my players. I say, hey, and then always usually after a win. And then by the end of it, I had parents come up to me at the end, even on losses, be like, Coach, they fought hard. They did a really good job. Thank you. And the coolest thing is when you do that, the coolest thing I've ever had in my coaching experience, I got invited to a wedding. Coolest thing ever. And I walked in the reception, and the first table that was there were former players. They turned around, they go, no way. And they all ran to me. And then the kid who was getting married, mom came up, grandma came up. They were like, we miss you so much. He talks about you all the time, XYZ. Those are the moments you want as a coach. Championships will come. They'll always be there. There'll be opportunities. But because I did what I did with that kid, and I love that kid to death, that's when you know you've won, is when the parents come up to you, and even after loss, and say, Coach, they gave it their best. We appreciate you. Or even get invited to a wedding. They still remember you, even though their son graduated 5 years ago.
I will tell you that the proactive communication works for coaches. It works for teachers. And if you just make a positive first impression, you're definitely in a much better position if you have to have a more difficult conversation and it's not the first time that you've ever communicated with the parent. If the first time you communicated with them, it's a negative conversation, the odds of that conversation going well are diminished significantly compared to if you've already sent a positive email, you've already had a positive phone call, you've already had a positive in-person conversation. It makes that second conversation or that third conversation that maybe has to dive into a difficult area a lot easier for the parent to be able to handle it in a positive way if they've already had that positive interaction. And I love your story about the wedding. And I've got to tell you a story that happened to me this weekend. So my daughter's playing in an AAU tournament, and I'm sitting on the bench, and our game is about to start. And out of the corner of my eye, I look at and I see a kid. I'm like, I think that's a kid that played for me. Now it's probably, oh boy. I mean, I haven't coached for 16, 17 years, and it's probably been 20 years since this kid played for me. And then he worked some of my basketball camps for me after he graduated. But I haven't seen him in probably 15 years, let's say. So out of the corner of my eye, I think that's him. So I stand up, and our game's going to start in a couple minutes. But I get up off the bench and I walk over to him. I'm like, Warner Cook, man, how you doing? And he looks up and he sees me and he's like, Coach. And he yells, and he comes over and he gives me this giant bear hug. And I don't know if I've ever been squeezed harder on a hug than this kid. I'm saying kid, he's probably now a 40-year-old guy, squeezes me and he's just like, Coach, it's so good to see you. And blah, blah, he's telling me about this. And there's no better feeling than that feeling that I had this past weekend, where there's times where we all know, right, as coaches, I mean, we know we're making an impact, but there's times where the job is tough, or as a teacher, and you have days where you're like, man, like, did I, like, what was I even doing here today? Like, I don't feel like I connected with anybody. And then you have a situation like that, or the wedding, and it all comes full circle, right? That you remember, you're like, even on days where maybe the kid didn't say that you were connecting with them, or maybe they were down, or maybe you had to get on them or whatever, man, if you do it right, like, those kids, they know you care about them. And that carries weight, not just when they're 17, but that carries weight when they're 35, when they're 40, and going on and on and on. And I think I always say that the best thing that happens to you as a coach is when you get a phone call and you pick it up and somebody on the other end of the line is like, hey, coach, and they just want to talk to you and tell you about whatever it is that's going on in their life. And that, again, we all love to win, and there's all the things that we talked about tonight on the podcast, but man, just the impact and being able to use the game to have an impact on people, to me, there's nothing better than that. So thanks for letting me jump in with my little story here, because it was just one that, again, really, really meant a lot to me this weekend, and it kind of dovetailed with what you were talking about. All right, I want to ask you one final 2-part question here, Austen, before we get out. Part one: when you look ahead over the next year or two, and obviously you're in the midst of trying to figure out what your next step is from a coaching perspective, but what do you see as being your biggest challenge? And then the second part of the question is, when you think about what you get to do as a coach, as a teacher, somebody who's impacting kids, what brings you the most joy? So your biggest challenge and your biggest joy.
Yeah. So obviously being in between is the biggest challenge. Is, I want to coach high school, basketball. The biggest challenge is, am I going to jump into eager, what's the program like? Also other challenges, like, man, there's assistant coaches that are probably in the district that are wanting to move up, that the ADs really like, or the kids really like, because that's a big piece. So that's always a challenge, kind of going into those. Or, the challenge may be, hey, do I need to sit and wait for an assistant coach position to open up here where I'm at, or the head coach to leave, XYZ? Those are usually the biggest kind of the challenges, and just kind of being okay with where you're at. Because I do, like, for myself, I can be stir crazy a little bit, like, man, I really want to coach like high school basketball, but at the same time, I'm like, I get to go home after school every day to my kids, and it's a nice feeling. But at the same time, it's like, man, I watch a basketball game, like, man, I want to be at that state tournament. I want to do that. But then again, I also, like, have little ones. So then when I can impact, young men and teach them about being a great role model, a leader, a husband, a father, like, what are those traits? Because the high schoolers don't think about that. But, like, those are topics that we talk about. Like, how do you become a great father? Like, what do you do? Because unless your dad is a great dad, and sadly, the way that world's working kind of is, there's a lot of divorce, and it's like, well, we kind of let's talk about, like, what becomes a great dad, what becomes a great husband, and we talk about those things, and we get, emotional with it. And those kind of things. So that's the joy I get out of coaching, is just getting to know those young men and just getting to see them grow too. Like I said, like if in my dream world, I would work at a district and the building was K through 12, and I taught there, and I knew every kindergartner through 12th grader, because when I did that at Parker, we were a quick K-12 building. I knew every 7th grader through 12th grader, and by the time they got to me, like I knew everyone. And that's always a nice one, where the schools around here are really big, but I would still love to coach at a big school. You know, you get more athletes, but the fact of it is like, hey, we need to make those relationships faster and stronger, and we need to be able to make those connections. I just love seeing like kids grow as athletes, but also as human beings, because I teach math. Yeah, you're probably not going to know the quadratic formula or Pythagorean theorem, but you know what? If I can teach you how to be a good person, to be humble, to be kind, I'm fine with that. That is a win.
Well said. And I think when you think about education in this country, it's what we can't measure, right? We can measure all these standardized tests and all this stuff, but to me, the true worth of a teacher and a coach is what they do when they put their arm around you and talk to you and get to know you. And you can't really measure that with statistics. And that's what it's all about. And it was really well said, Austen. Before we wrap up, I want to give you a chance to share. How can people connect with you, find out more about what you're doing, share your social media, email, whatever you feel comfortable with? And then after you do that, I'll jump back in and wrap things up.
Okay. Yeah. So Coach Hurley, you can find me on Twitter at Coach Hurls. Shoot me a DM if you ever need anything. I respond pretty quickly. That's the best way to get it. If you ever need to watch a video, you can search up Austen Hurley. I have some videos of Coach DeMarco that are really great. You can go there. I have some things. If coaches need anything, just hit me up and I'll reach back as soon as possible.
Perfect. Austen, cannot thank you enough for taking the time out of your schedule tonight to join us. Really appreciate it. And to everyone out there, thanks for listening, and we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks. Your first impression is everything when applying for a new coaching job. A professional coaching portfolio is the tool that highlights your coaching achievements and philosophies, and most of all, helps separate you and your abilities from the other applicants. The Coaching Portfolio Guide is an instructional, membership-based website that helps you develop a personalized portfolio. Each section of the Portfolio Guide provides detailed instructions on how to organize your portfolio in a professional manner. The guide also provides sample documents for each section of your portfolio that you can copy, modify, and add to your personal portfolio. As a Hoopheads Pod listener, you can get your Coaching Portfolio Guide for just $25. Visit coachingportfolioguide.com/hoopheads to learn more.
Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.